We've made it to the third part of our video. We're on page 13. We're not quite done yet, but we're very close. You'll need to be sure that you complete all of the different elements on this page. It has a lot of little pieces. We're going to go through them one by one. Let's get started. In the top left corner, you're going to find part number 3, Intergovernmental Expenditures. This is where we are reporting to the federal government how the state and local governments are working together. We need to report any amount paid to other local governments. Some cities may be paying other libraries so that their citizens have access to library services. This is where that would be reported. Other cities have 28E agreements provide police protection, either with the sheriff's office or another municipal police department. This is also where that would be reported. As you go through, please make sure to put in zeros in the fields that you have not made any payments to. You may have zeros in all of these fields. By putting in a zero, it indicates that you have not just accidentally missed this part of the report. Over on the right side of your screen, you will see a place to report the amount that you have paid to the state. Let's move on to part 4, Salaries and Wages. This is where you need to report all of the salaries and wages paid to all employees of your city before deductions of either Social Security, retirement, etc. You need to also include salaries and wages paid to employees of any municipal-owned utility, as well as your mayor and council. As you know, cities are required to publish their gross salaries once a year. There are typically 2 times during the year that cities choose to do this. If your city does this publication on the fiscal year, this will be the same amount that you enter for Part 4. Your city may choose to report gross salaries and publish them after the end of the calendar year when you are preparing all of the tax documents. That's just fine too, but know that your total will not match what you put in the box for Part 4. Now let's move on to Part 5, Debt, Outstanding, Issued, and Retired. Now I know, looking at Part 5 when it's all blank and it's a big table looks a little scary. But this is really an easy piece to do, especially if you have finished your outstanding debt report that is due August 31st. So if you're listening to this recording after August 31st, then go pull that out. It's going to help you with Part 5. So let's look at it piece by piece. In the first column, A, you have your debt outstanding as of July 1st, 2016. That was the beginning of your fiscal year. If you don't have that information handy on your outstanding debt report, you could pull out last year's AFR and use your ending balance. All of the purposes for these debts are listed in the left column. It could be a water bond, could be for your sewer, could be a TIF project. You have extra lines that you can add at the bottom. In this case, this city has a CDBG that they are paying back. They also took out a pre-levy and recorded it on this sheet as well. Column B is debt incurred during the fiscal year. Like I mentioned, this city has a pre-levy. They are planning for $200,000 of issued debt. Column C looks at what you retired during the year. How much did you make in payments? For the sewer utility, on this page, $78,000 was paid toward that bond's principal. This column is for principal payments only, as interest will be recorded later. The next column looks at outstanding debt at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2017. It is showing you the balance that's left. And again, these balances should be the same as what's on the outstanding debt report. They are broken into the columns of general obligation debt, TIF debt, and revenue or proprietary funds utilities. On the far right, you have column H. That is where you record any interest paid on these debts during the year. Just like all of the other workbook pages, All of your columns are totaled along the bottom in the blue numbers. Let's move on to Part B of Section 5. It's short-term debt. This area is often overlooked. It includes anything that was short-term and happened during the fiscal year. You may have taken out a short-term lease on a piece of equipment, or possibly had something happen where you had to take out a short-term loan. This is the area where that type of debt is reported. Now, we're about halfway through page 13. It would be a good time to save your work. Now let's look at Part 6, your debt limit calculation. This is a great part because the workbook does it for you. When you put in your city's name way back at the beginning on page 1, if you have internet access, this piece will automatically populate for you. It's going to fill in your assessed valuation and then do the calculation for 5% and let you know what your constitutional debt limit is. This is a great number for your council to know. It is certainly not advisable to take out as much debt as you are allowed to by the limit. You always want to keep some in reserve in case of an emergency. Now let's jump back to page 1, that summary page, and look in the middle section. You can see the blue numbers have started to fill in from all of the other pages that you've completed in this report. As I promised, your ending fund balance has been moved up to your front page. This is that number that better matched your end of year general ledger. But you may have funds that have not been reported as we've filled out this report. This is the place to put those in. So this first line is for non-budgeted internal service funds. We talked about those earlier. Anything that's non-budgeted for internal service fund goes on this line. The next line is for pension trust funds. So if you still have a 411 trust fund, it would be reported here. This is not, however, a place to report any money that is due to IPERS. The next line is for private purpose trust funds. So, for example, say you had a benefactor who gave the city some stocks and bonds for a future purpose. And you can't report those stocks and bonds as current cash because you can't get to them. But you need to report that the city is responsible for them and has ownership of them. So this is where that amount would go. And finally, on this last line, you're going to report any agency funds that are not budgeted and not available for city operations. The total of those 4 lines, your ending fund balance plus your internal service fund, your pension trust fund, your private purpose trust funds, and your agency funds are going to equal a total on page 13. So here we go back to page 13. But before that, we're going to take a quick look at the instructions that cover Part 7, which is where we're headed on page 13. This set of instructions should cover any questions that you have about how to complete Part 7. So here we go, back to page 13. Part 7 is cash and investment assets as of June 30th, 2017. And just like the rest of your worksheet, you have columns A, B, C, D that are going to add up automatically to equal the total in column E. You will need to report bond and interest funds in column A. You will need to report any bond construction funds in column B. So maybe you have a construction project going on where you have pulled bond money, but you have not spent it yet. This would be where you would report the amount that is unspent. Here's the column where you're going to put your pension and retirement funds, like we talked about for possibly a 411 fund. And column D is where you're going to have all of your other funds represented. Column E is the total of all of those columns. Does that number look familiar? Of course it does. It is your ending fund balance for June 30th, 2017. Now we're going to move on to a little line called remarks. This is the area that you're going to use if there are any changes being made to the beginning fund balance on your worksheet. So after submitting your annual finance report last year, you realized that something was miscategorized, or you went through the process of an audit and they made some major changes, moving an expense from maybe a capital project account to a proprietary account. You want to make sure that your beginning fund balance is correct with your general ledger. However, it's going to show that it's not the same as your ending fund balance for last year's AFR. So if the beginning fund balance this year is going to be different than what you ended with last year, this is the area where you need to detail out why that has occurred. Congratulations, you have finished the video part 3. We have made it through the annual finance report parts 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and remarks. These were found on page 13.